Excellent. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is Thursday, August 16th, and this is Straight Up Startups. My name is Connor Kaysen, and as always, joined with founder and creator of Founders Live, Nick Hughes. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Doing well. Just every day is a new challenge.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You've been busy lately?
Oh yeah, I was up early this morning, working on some cool stuff that you might find out about soon enough.
Awesome, awesome. I was thinking, Nick, we haven't really done too much of kind of an intro of different stuff that you're working on. Let's start today before we jump into some of the topics. Let's just tell the audience a little bit about what you have going on this summer and what kind of projects you are working on, at least for the things that you can share.
Yeah, I have so much going on. It's crazy. I would say my day jobs would be a combination of two different projects I'm working on. They're both early stage. One is called Code Alley, which is a essentially a cloud-based engineering and outsource concept that we're actually still determining all the pieces that are going in place right now, but that's a handful of months old. And then I'm also working on a really cool, fun mobile sports app. It's around sports predictions and social fan engagement. It's cool, man. We're working on that. That should drop in basically the first week of September for the first week of NFL and college football.
Nice.
So yeah, really exciting stuff around that, and those keep me busy. Yeah. So how about you, man?
Cool. Yeah. So I got a couple things going on. Firstly, how I guess one of the places where I worked with you, I work for a company called Notice, Knotis. I'm known as what's the neighborhood concierge of the team, and so we're building a piece of software just to help local businesses with marketing, getting their name out there, and just getting noticed, whether it's online or in physical marketing forms. And then I also do a lot of consulting work with helping with websites and social media consulting for all those local businesses, kind of a two-tiered approach to helping local businesses.
Awesome. Awesome.
But cool, let's jump in. So the first topic that we got this week was an article written by GeekWire. I think his name's Adam Lang. And what he did is I think he put an email out to all these different startup founders here in Seattle and asked them kind of what their story was and how they came up with their name. And things were all across the board. They had a bunch of different companies. Some of them I hadn't even heard of. I would say the majority of them are pretty well known here in the city. But Nick, kind of the first question to you, and wanted to hear your thoughts on what does it mean to create a name, and what is the importance and what kind of steps should someone take in finding their name?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's an absolute, so important. It's so important that I think sometimes this gets overlooked, especially when you look at some of the startup names that you see around here. And I think the name of a product or a company is it's the first touch point. And if people can't pronounce it, if they can't read it, if there isn't a strong positive association, I think that's a problem. And you asked me what I'm working on. The sports app that we're working on, it's called Callin' It, and you can call or predict what you think is going to happen in a game. And the response that we've got on that name is they're like, wow, that's cool, calling it. So people can say like, hey, I'm calling it, or it can become a verb and can become a branded thing. And so, it's early days for our project, but the naming of a company and a product, especially a consumer app, is utmost importance. It requires time, it requires study and research, and I think it's very, very important. Yeah. So I mean, what have you guys experienced over there at Notice, and what is your general thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, so when I first met the CEO, his name's McLean, and he told me about Notice. It really fit the whole story, right? We're just about getting local businesses more noticed within their neighborhood or in the digital world. And that really stuck with me. It's spelled an odd way, so it's Knotis. So a lot of people call us Knotis because the Knot just go, everyone thinks not. And so that's been a big struggle for us. And I think a lot of it, we do a lot of in-person conversations and meetings with these local business owners. So I think we haven't done a great job kind of making that stick, but I do really believe that the name is really creative, really innovative. And if we do get the technology to a place that is going to be, you know, a consumer-facing product and very popular, I think that will catch on, and it's something that will apply. But I kind of want to talk about some of the examples in the article that I thought was really interesting. The first one, Anthology, which originally started with the name Poachable, and they were going through some legal battles. What Anthology does, if you haven't heard about it and you're looking for a job, it's kind of like a Tinder for searching for jobs. It's kind of a little bit more anonymous job matchmaking. And so they were called Poachable, and they went through some lawsuits. And I thought that was kind of it had a very negative, you know, stealing employees attitude towards it. So they went to Anthology, and it didn't affect them at all. The other one that I really liked was how Porch came up with their name. Porch just really, it does a great job with the porch kind of being the place where you meet with your neighbors. It's a community space, but also takes place on your private property. And I think that fits really well to what their product is, and kind of bringing the neighborhood together, but also having it kind of in this private online spot. And then the third one, which I really loved, is someone that you and I are very familiar with, is Seaton from Surf Incubator here in Seattle. That's actually, I think, the first place that I met you, Nick, was at Surf Incubator. Yeah. And Seaton is known for wearing like his Hawaiian shirts, and I thought surf just kind of came from that, and you know, his visions of wanting to be on the beach. But he gave it an acronym. It's Startup Really Fast, and I love that was the acronym associated with surf. I didn't know that until I read this article.
That's awesome. I was there years ago, and I remember him telling that story. The one that jumped out at me, I mean, I think clearly they're a larger company now, but Tune, which was called Has Offers before that, which is funny. Like, you know, people would say, they would hear Has Offers, and they're like, Has Offers, I mean, what is that? Like, is it a daily deal site? Is it, you know, what's going on here? And they took a long time. I think they knew early on, okay, this name is not really fitting, and they took years to actually figure out and find the right name, and Tune is now it. And clearly they spent some money on that URL, and but they took a lot of thought into now, like, the branding and the name, and I think that there's a very strong brand recognition now. So it was cool to, you know, see Peter on there and him talking about how they went about that. But yeah, so moving on, you know, this actually is a TechCrunch post that came out probably about, you know, a week ago, maybe less, and basically it's talking about what I thought was really interesting. It was talking about what LinkedIn, the possible future of LinkedIn, or possibly the possible miss that LinkedIn might not reach, which is around the experience graph, not the resume. And so I guess the question is, where do you stand on resumes for entrepreneurs, and are they relevant at this point?
Yeah, so I love this article. I've been doing a lot, kind of building an online portfolio for myself, and thinking about just different ways to build websites and kind of show my experience off, and how that all works. The whole resume, even when I was in college and I was learning about resumes, I used to TA a resume writing workshop, and I've helped a lot of people with the resumes. The resume is almost worthless at this point. It gets no time. People spend hours and hours and hours working on it, and as you probably should, to make sure it's good. But when it gets to the hiring manager or even the recruiters, I mean, they don't spend more than 60 seconds looking at these things. It's very simple. They look at very short pieces. They look at the company, they look at how long you were there for, what your job title was, and they might look at those verbs on the bullet points. And if you are looking to write your resume, those are the key points that you want to look at, as those verbs within your bullets. But I think that just something needs to evolve, and with all this changing online and everything going online, I think there's just a huge opportunity to convey all the information in a much simpler, reader-friendly way, using graphs or charts, or just something a little bit more visually appealing than text on a page. We have so much data and information that I think we really can put that out there. And I think this concept, I didn't look into who wrote this, but it's a very millennial thing to call it an experience graph. I think that's a big difference. And they say associated with millennials a lot is like we crave experiences more than like tangible items, right? Not so much about buying cars and buying the newest, nicest thing. It's more about like going to concerts, going to festivals, going to travel. Those are kind of becoming a much bigger thing now. And so putting this experience graph in there, I really like, because I think there are things that are not necessarily as important, but very important that you can experience that you can't put on a resume. Like for young people who are just coming out of college, putting your travel abroad experience is very important. Saying that you kind of have a global view and you've experienced other things outside of your little bubble, I think is very important, especially if you're finding entry-level candidates, but just different projects. And I know GitHub is a big place right now for developers. And so I think that's an interesting piece of technology that needs to get incorporated, because most engineers aren't using a traditional resume anymore. They have portfolios or they have their GitHub account, and that's where the hiring managers go to see their work. So I think something needs to evolve, and LinkedIn obviously is in the great position to make that. And I think if someone can put a social graph out there that is easy to understand and really gives a better picture of who that candidate is and what they've experienced, that's going to create a better experience for both sides.
Yeah, this was a great article, and I think they're touching on a number of different aspects of, basically the resume is over, in the sense that a title, a date, and some bullet points and a paragraph of what you did that's static, right? And the fact is, in this day and age, I think we as, whether you are an employee, you're doing a number of different jobs or skill sets over the course of your, not only like a year, but your career. But as entrepreneurs, you're working on really random stuff sometimes, but you're building skills. And so what I loved about what they are pointing out is that it's basically pulling all these little data points, like you read an article, you registered and completed a hackathon, you watched a live streamed event or a webinar on such and such topic. All that plugs into your experience graph to pretty much provide this cloud of experience and knowledge. And I, as a CEO and as a hiring manager, want to look at that and say, wow, this person is well-rounded, this person has seen and done this. And that is all linked into everything else versus just reading a piece of paper or like, even today, like I think when you look at LinkedIn, and that almost is becoming your online quote resume, but it's still there's a lot to be desired, right? So I think that they're pointing out a very, very interesting thing, and I'll just note this before we move on. I liked what they were talking about, and with Founders Live, I'm looking that direction, in the sense of, can we build this platform and also start connecting things in a way that Founders Live becomes a desired place for all entrepreneurs to be, because they're learning as well as they're connected with others, and as well as maybe there's data and information that is synced into that illustrates their vast knowledge, So that's kind of what I'm thinking, man.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn, especially with their acquisition of Lynda and this conversation about what XAPI is doing and trying to get this new experience graph out, I mean, I think they have a big opportunity to really change the academic forum right now. I mean, education is way overpriced right now. There's a lot of problems. It's going to need to get reconstructed, and kind of what they're doing is trying to get this education piece. I think it'll be a really good way to say, hey, this is all the things that I did, especially I did online, that can vouch for a degree of some kind by showing all these things, all these hours that you put in. It's not much different than a degree. I think LinkedIn will have a big voice in that coming change that'll happen. I mean, it's not going to happen until 2030s by what this article's plan was. But I think it's really interesting. It could be a big play for LinkedIn. I guess that means Microsoft if they do it the right way. But the next article we have, it came from Entrepreneur Magazine, and what it was the article, let me see, the author, his name is Daniel Newman, and the title was The Competitive Advantage of a Startup's Beta Mindset. And what he does is he lays out kind of some steps about being able to think critically and move quickly, which is so important for a startup and is actually one of the advantages that startups usually have over the big companies because they can pivot or move or make faster decisions. So he has a couple different steps. First one is get on the same page with all your customers. So you just have a lot more access in a startup. Empower your employees. So that's actually giving them the opportunity to make decisions, embracing critical feedback, to drop hierarchical pretenses, take chances and move fast, and communicate all the time. And so, Nick, I wanted to know what you thought about this whole beta mindset and how it applies to startups.
Yeah, well, it's funny that, as I read the article, which I think everyone should, if you're listening here, you got to check that out. There's a link on Founders Live to check it out. But as I read it, it just a little bit smelled like some guy writing to the large corporate company, like, hey, try these things. And he's like using some very buzzy words that we all talk about common sense wise as a startup. With that being said, I think it's good advice, right? It's basically, the biggest challenge with large or enterprises is that they're just so large that they move slow. They have the whole mindset of, well, we've been doing it this way forever, so why change? And a lot of that tends to be not communicating openly with their customers, which basically allows a company to learn what existing or potential customers actually value. Those sort of things are commonplace in education of early stage startups and founders. So I feel like he had great points. And I think following that, whether you're a large company trying to change, or if you're an early stage founder, it's absolutely the beta mindset of flexibility, of open communication, of empowerment of your employees, all that. I fully agree. I just kind of got that feeling of this guy seems to be writing to the enterprise, middle manager that is just actually dying to probably go work at a startup.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right there. I think that was his target demographic. It is Entrepreneur Magazine, right, which is probably read by more the corporate 40 hours a week kind of person than the startup. So just because there's so many more of those people, that is the big target audience that these big magazines have to reach to. So yeah, I totally agree. I think that it was geared towards these people who don't think like a startup, just telling them like, hey, this is how startups are successful because they think a different way. And the point that I thought, which is very important for entrepreneurs to never forget, is empowering your employees is so important. When you're a founder and you're the CEO and you created the project, you usually get so caught up in everything that's going on and you want to have your hand because it's your baby. You want to make sure that everything's done right and done correctly. But letting your employees have some of that power, responsibility, and being empathetic to their situation, I think is one of the most important things that you can learn as a CEO, to really let go and let those employees do it. Because no matter what, if you're going to grow and you're going to scale, you have to learn to do that. So if you can learn to do it early and have that trust, I think it's going to pay you back in the long run.
Great point. Definitely. I agree 100%. With that, moving on to, there was an article written on Founders Live, I think it was yesterday, by the founder of, it's called Forward Force, which is a really cool new, essentially crowdfunding platform, but creates a unique twist on the crowdfunding aspect and involves a competition and really cool stuff. You should check it out, Forward Force. But he basically wrote about building an MVP and basically and the aspects of how much intuition do you use, how much customer validation, what goes into an MVP, and I thought it was really great. I added it in here for that. And what was your take on the article, and what popped out at you in terms of if you've experienced or seen a company building an MVP?
Yeah, well, first, just kind of related a little bit to different people. I really like that it was written from the perspective of a product manager and saying, like, this is usually the person that's going to have a certain type of skill set that you really need to look for when you do bring that person in to be the owner of the product. And that person usually is less emotional and more analytical in their decision making, because a lot of times when you're the creator or the founder, it's impossible to avoid the emotions of running your company. And I think for the most part, making those emotional decisions can a lot of times be a benefit, because that's what makes you take that risk, right? If we're all analytical in all of our decisions, most of us wouldn't be in startups, because that is the risk that we're all taking to go on this journey. But thinking about, making analytical decisions, you have to get in that time frame when it comes to making tough decisions of, is this going to work or not going to work? So I really like the end part where we talked about termination. It's kind of fail fast, fail forward, which we've all heard, but it's about really being able to objectively look at where you're at and does it fit, or if it doesn't fit, and making a decision to make a move, and how hard that is. It's a sunk cost fallacy where you put all of this work and time and money, but if it's not going to work, you're better off trying to save the ship than go down with the ship. So I really like that, and I also like the graphs. I thought this was the article, right? Maybe not. Just where your product fits. Maybe that's coming up, and I'm off topic. What about you?
Yeah, I'll jump in here and actually touch on what he talked about in terms of the emotional attachment, and the difference there is then the when to cut the cord, or what decision do you make, right? And so what I found is most of the time, most founders don't make the critical decisions fast enough. And this kind of goes back to the beta mindset, which is the part of that is just being able to move fast and really get feedback and make decisions quickly. And so we're tying these two in together, which is I think the best thing, or the best idea or thought that founders need to take is, do not emotionally attach yourself to the business or the product to a certain level, clearly, because you need to care about it, but don't attach yourself too much, because you're not going to be able to be agile enough to make the critical decisions, cut the fat, and or shut it down as quick as possible. The most precious thing you have in this world is time. And if you spend 3, 4, 5 years dragging along a dead product, you just lost 4 or 5 years of your life. You could have cut it a year into it, made different decisions, go build another product, go do something else. You know what I mean? So like that is, we laugh, but it's like there's people doing that. And so I think what he was touching on was it's very nuanced. Intuition is a part of it, but you have to remove yourself emotionally, look at data, make a decision quickly, pivot, change, and then, oh, by the way, if it's not turning, if you're not on a rocket ship, then just shut it down and move on. Like, yeah, that is something that I think we've talked about this before, this concept. But yeah, I think this is a great article.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question that you might be able to help with. So where do you draw the line between you get told, I mean, you're going to go through a lot of negativity, a lot of hate, a lot of people not understanding what you're doing when you're an entrepreneur, especially in the early stages. Kind of when do you make the shift between I'm getting all this negative feedback, or people aren't interested in not wanting to invest, and that kind of being just talk per se, versus, oh, this is actually good feedback and I do need to cut it off. It's a gray area on when you need to make that decision. Do you have any advice on when to not listen versus when to listen?
It's so subjective. It's so dependent on the situation, but I do think it's one thing that everyone can lock onto is you internally determine certain metrics that if they are not moving in the direction you want, then you have to change, and you can't hold on to the rope too long. And so it's also like there's an easy deception as founders, you can just deceive yourself and say, oh no, we just need to make this feature change, this enhancement, we'll push this. It's at some point you determine internally if what is working, what is not. If this number is going up, we're working. If this number is not going up, it's not. And so I don't know how more clearly to say it because it's so subjective, but I think that is where you draw the line, is like at some point, like I think in the end, as a founder, when your product is working, people are coming out of the woodwork saying thank yous, people are using it, they're passing it on, you are literally trying to keep up with the growth. If that's not the case, you have a problem.
Yep. And so on to the next topic. I apologize, Nick. I realized this was my fault and I skipped one of the topics from earlier.
No, let's bring it up. Let's do it.
There was another TechCrunch article that was reporting on a pretty big company last year. It was a live streaming app called Blab, B-L-A-B. They were known. They had 3.9 million users that signed up in 1 year, and it was kind of a competitor to Periscope and Facebook Live, and they got really big, but they just had to shut down the company. They're actually going to make kind of a secret pivot with all the founders, and the main reason they were talking was only 10% of the users came back. Which is kind of a really big problem when you have 3.9 million people sign up. And so the quote that I really liked from him here, and I want to ask you, Nick, the founder of the company, he said, Blab was great in many ways, but it wasn't going to be an everyday thing for millions. So we're kicking down the sandcastle and rebuilding it as an always-on place to hang with friends. And so do you think it's more important that you have to build for the millions, or would it be better to get something that's niche that people are going to come to every day?
Yeah, I'm going to go with niche and that people come to every day. I definitely subscribe to, I think it was Paul Graham that said, please 1,000, so make 1,000 early users happy and you'll have a business. But if you can't have a strong core group of users that just absolutely love your product, you're never going to make it. And I think look, I'm not a founder of Blab. I didn't know their numbers. I didn't know what was going on. But if it's less than 10%, they're probably pushing that number. So it had to be less than 10% were engaged and coming back. That's a problem. Like, you're not building an engaging, sustainable app. And so they, speaking of, turning it off, that's what they did, right? And so this is a lesson to founders of, they clearly didn't have product market fit in the sense that they weren't pleasing a large group of users that were coming back consistently. And the more and more of those you get, the more those users tell their friends, and the more those users become it becomes very valuable in their life. And they obviously didn't have that. I think that their churn was massive. Internally, they said this is not working. So I'm focused on building for a very small group of users that you once you meet their need. And I think that what that means is actually narrow in your focus and only pay attention to those. And then once you hit, quote, product market fit, now you can start expanding out, because there's more than 1,000 people that will like your product. But if you find that core group, you nail it, then you start spending money to get more of those similar type of people.
Yeah, and my experience with Blab, I did play around with it a little bit because I was helping a similar company out around the same time, and I kept hearing about it when I was talking to people. And what I think Blab didn't do well is they didn't find who that core audience was, and they didn't find like people who were going to create good content that was going to be mass appealing. I really think that what Snapchat and Facebook Live are doing is obviously they have a lot more financial resources to go after these people, but they're doing a really good job finding people that are going to draw people in. They're finding the curators, they're finding the Kim Kardashians, the Tim Ferrisses, those people that if they go live at any moment, there's going to be thousands or millions of people that are going to tune in and keep checking them out no matter what. And I think that's if you're trying to get into the live streaming, that is a big piece. You need a piece of content that's going to appeal to a massive amount of people early on, so they do keep coming back, because most people are going to come to consume, not to be the creators. And I think that was the kind of the two-headed beast that they were struggling with.
Yeah, and interesting transition, but the next topic we're going to talk to is not all great products make good businesses. And like, this is not just Blab, but this comes up all the time. And I thought that this article, probably the best out of our bunch. Anyone, you got to check it out. Search that title. Not all good products make good businesses. If you're on Founders Live, we just posted it. What do you think the difference between a good product is and in turning into a good business?
So this is the one that had the T charts that I really liked, and kind of finding where your product fits. And I think when everyone's thinking about products, a T chart comes at some point. And the point that I know he starts off that I really liked was finding, when you're thinking about your problems that you're going to solve, which is obviously the core to starting a business and solving a problem, is if it's a small problem that isn't going to generate enough money, then it's not worth you fixing. And he gives a great breakdown that if it's going to take 4 hours to onboard a customer, right, and they're paying $19 a month, you're actually not going to make money off that person for a whole year. So that takes a year of them using the product and being active. Hopefully you don't lose that. You're going to lose some percentage of those people before you even break even on that customer. So really defining how much work it's going to be based off that customer is very important, especially on the early stage. Onboarding is probably your biggest number. How much is it going to take to market that person, to get them to sign up, get them trained to use the product, especially if you're SaaS or a business product that they're going to be paying you every month, and kind of finding that network, that nice space where it's not too expensive, not too cheap, and provides enough value. And so I really like, I think everyone should look at those charts. I think it's very clear on the visual about what it sets up.
Yeah, look, this incredible article, I think it touches on a lot of the mistakes that founders and startups make, which is not fully unfolding the area of, so I guess what you would call the problem solution issue and the area that they're innovating around. And I thought that some of the charts in there talk about, like, is it rare and is it big or small? Rare or frequent, big or small? And you can basically, a T-chart there, and you want to look at, like, there's some different variables in there. What you don't want is rare and small, right? Like, I mean, you want to solve a big problem that happens frequently, or at least you want to solve a problem that people will gravitate towards. And also, when you go deeper into that article, it's talking about, yeah, the onboarding, like, is the barrier of adoption high or low? And, you know, then that gets into cost of customer acquisition, the time, like, if you create a wall for people to climb over before they can start using your application, not going to work. And I think in the end, what this points to is, as a founding team, when you're in the ideation stage, so the early stage of creating this idea, you know, it's thinking deeper on where the value creation is and where people are going to pay. Like, when there's value creation, that's when people pay. So where does the value creation fall into that experience? And how easy or how hard is it for them to experience it, and where are they going to part with dollars? Mm-hmm. And it's actually more difficult than said, right? And so that is, it's probably the most common issue, I think, when I see a lot of founders. They're like, hey, we're working on this idea, and they've thought about it in a closet, they've hacked on it for X amount of time, and they don't realize that they're solving a rare opportunity, or a rare thing with a small opportunity. And it's like, what are you guys working on this for? You know, so yeah, it's very awesome article.
Yeah, and the last point that I think what was really good that he makes, with it being a good product, is how important it is to be more than just knowledgeable about the industry and actually have experience in what you're solving.
Oh yeah.
Right, and if you've only worked at small companies, it's going to be really difficult to make an enterprise level software because you've never solved problems at that level. And vice versa, if you only worked at big companies and you want to make a tool for small teams, it's going to be very difficult. So really understanding the market that you come from usually is what gives a big advantage to people when they create platforms. I know Jack Dorsey, when he created Twitter, what he was obsessed with was the AOL Instant Messenger away message. You know, he was obsessed that people could type one sentence and put it up kind of for everyone to see while they're away. And that passion for being really interested in that is what sparked the whole idea in Twitter. And yeah, just knowing, you know, whatever you're going to, that's the same thing with Slack, right? Slack, they were working on something completely different, but internally they needed to solve their own problems. So they created the messaging tool so they could interact, and now they're $1 billion company, and that is what ended up coming from it. So solving your own problems is really important, and having experience in solving those problems makes a big step. But going on to the next article, this was posted by Nick from Working Knowledge, and it was the author's name is Michael Blanding, and it comes from a study by a man named, I think it's Thales Teixeira, and he did a study on the 3 most successful platform startups, which are Uber, Airbnb, and Etsy, and how they attracted their first 1,000 customers. So he did a study, actually, he wrote a book on the first 1,000. I know he had a second book that was about how do you go from 1,000 to 1,000,000, and now he's finishing a third series about how do you go from 1,000,000 to multiple millions. And so, Nick, the question regarding this is just like, what are your tips and tricks or best ways to get the first few users of a product, and what do you suggest?
Well, let's go back to what we just talked about. I think, like the common, in the first part of this article, the common thread is kind of that first 1,000, making a certain small segment of people happy and it absolutely shouting about your app is I think the common thread of what Uber, Airbnb, and Etsy did. And clearly specific to their product, the article goes through talking about what Airbnb did with literally actually here's a very interesting aspect of it, which was they're talking about marketplaces, and they're like, look, it's a chicken and the egg. When you have a dual-sided marketplace, do you see the supply or the demand? And they actually, and this is something I've heard recently, quite a few resources, is you actually seed the supply, which basically means with Airbnb, you're not going to get people wanting to rent out a room unless you have amount of rooms that are high quality already there. And when you look at Airbnb, they went to those, they basically hacked Craigslist, they scraped it. They then went to those people that are offering the rooms and said, hey, why don't you list it here too? So at the point that they got a critical mass of quality rooms, they then can turn around, and now people are starting, people that want to rent them, go there and see the inventory, and they actually can now have a great experience. So seed the supply. That might take a little while, but what do they have to lose anyway? So for Uber, just get all the taxis on there, get these black cars on there, then you start pushing people towards the app, then the wheel starts spinning. And I thought that was very interesting, and if you're building a dual-sided marketplace, you have to choose one side, fill it up, focus on it as much as you can, then start driving traffic to it. Then you can get a reoccurring wheel going around. So I thought that was really cool. But in the end, the common theme is focus on a small segment, get that going, then you can start expanding out. And sometimes startups don't even hit that small segment, but once you hit that, now you can start growing it.
Yeah, and just the stories specifically with Uber and Airbnb, with the chicken and the egg, it is interesting because people are always like, oh, it's double-sided. I know with my company, we're going through a similar thing. But usually one does come first, and you do have to make the decision. And for those two, the decision was pretty obvious. Right, is we can't get these consumers to use it if we don't have the other side. But on the other side, you can always set the expectations of, hey, we need to get you first, and then we're going to go after the customers. And that's something that I've really struggled at in my job, because we work with all these different businesses, and we're trying to present to them a future and what we want to do, but we don't have the customer side developed yet. So it's a lot about setting the expectations of, hey, we want to get you on here. It's going to be slow to start, but we're going to get to that point, and then you'll really appreciate it in the end. So it is interesting that you really do have to dedicate, and usually one side, there's more advantage than the other side. It's not necessarily like, oh, it's 50-50. And then the other point is thinking like a customer. Right, Airbnb, they realized, and they went for Craigslist. Right, Craigslist is the only place that was happening, and they just attacked them right at the throat. I thought that was great. And then with Uber, what Uber was great at is first they started with the black car service. I remember it was like 2011 when I first heard about it, and it was only black car, and I was like, why are you ordering a black car, dude? Like, that's going to be so expensive. And it's crazy to see what it's become. But that was a really smart start for them, because they knew those people were already there, and they already owned their cars, and they didn't have to build that trust of some random person driving their own car. And then they attacked high density events. Right, so they're very focused on their marketing platform and when they're going to reach out to people and where they're going to target. And it was when they knew that the taxis couldn't handle the demand. right? So we're going to attack concerts and events, and we know that there's not going to be enough taxis. People are going to be stranded, and people are going to be a lot more willing to take a risk on this random company called Uber. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, I'll finish this off by kind of a left-hand turn, no pun intended, but I was listening to a podcast today, and Dave McClure from 500 Startups was getting interviewed, and he said this Uber was his one investment that he kicks himself every day. He said no like 3 times.
Wow.
He literally turned down, and I was like, oh my God, like, it's amazing the mentality that goes into like investors like saying no. Maybe they had a bad day, maybe they didn't like the existing investors or the founders or whatever. But he literally said every day, dude, I wake up every day and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, he said no, and he's kicking himself every day because that's like hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, that he lost by just for some reason saying no. And I was just thinking, like, I wonder what was possessing him to say that.
Yeah, the Uber thing's really interesting though, because we're just kind of coming out of this time where the car has been king for the last 30 years, from when we kind of started moving into the suburbs and the suburbs became very popular. The car really has dominated, and so I think some people were stuck on like, the car is going away with Uber, when it's not actually going away. We're just sharing it and being more communal with automobiles. And so, yeah, that it had to have been tough. And if you didn't understand, he's in New York though, right? He's like a huge taxi guy.
No. This is Dave McClure. He's in San Francisco.
Oh, he's in San Francisco. Okay, so maybe taxis weren't as big. I mean, I would think the guys in New York would have been all over it though, just because they see how many taxis, they know how the supply and demand goes with that. But yeah, it's a he's gonna never ever forget that, and I'm sure he thinks twice about every startup he gets pitched now.
Yeah. Hey, last topic here, and this was from both sides of the table. Mark Suster, love him, read him all the time, and he wrote about a couple books. They are more social or civil, kind of like race oriented. Like, I haven't read them yet. I think it's interesting, and definitely want to jump on his recommendations, but it just sparked the thought, what is the best book of your summer? Doesn't have to be a new release. What is one that's come to mind that you thought was thought-provoking and one that you would recommend to everyone?
So I got a couple thoughts because I'm a pretty big reader, and actually that's been something the last couple of years. But personally, I actually for the last year, I haven't been reading as many business nonfiction books, just because I felt they're kind of stale, and I'm in my job and working and networking and meeting all these people and having conversations like this all the time, that it was really just I wasn't excited. So I've been reading a lot more fiction, and that's just a way to separate myself, to learn, or to be more creative and think about other ways and how people vision the world. But I actually just went to the Amazon store in University Village. If you haven't been there, it's a really, really interesting experience. It's been designed very well. And they price match everything on their website. So I know it was mentioned in the article, I just bought Phil Knight, Shoe Dog, Go Ducks. So I'm excited to start digging into that one. But the audiobook that I just listened to was recommended by Tim Ferriss, is How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia by Mohsin Hamid. And it's something like I've never listened or read before, but it's in second person. So he has these 7 steps to becoming successful or filthy rich in Asia. And he doesn't actually say where it is. They speculate that he's actually in Pakistan, but I kind of thought more that he was in China because I thought Asia. But it's written in second person. So the book starts off and you are the character. You wake up in the morning, you walk into the kitchen and your mom's there cooking you breakfast. She yells at you because you woke up late, right? So it's all in that person where you are the main character. And he kind of riffs a lot on a lot of self-help books, and that's how he intros it. Like this is a self-help book, but it's not like a self-help book. And he kind of makes a parody of kind of a lot of these books that have become very famous for being self-help books. But he goes through these 7 steps of how to be successful. And some of the steps here I can tell you about is one, learn from a master, kind of having a mentor. Another one was really interesting about don't fall in love and just distractions in general. Another one is be prepared to use violence, which was really interesting. And that's just kind of growing up from being at a farm to in the city. But the way he ends it, you go through 80 years of his life and the ups and downs and his loves and his losses. And everything that he goes through, and obviously ends up being very successful. But the very last point is have an exit strategy. And this is actually something that you learn when you're on your deathbed and he's reflecting on his life. And I just really thought it was a great way. It's a really short read. It was only a 4-hour audiobook. So I read it in 3 days. It was really quick, but it was just a really great process to really understand a different culture and what that society is like and kind of growing up. But the big thing that I thought was really interesting, a lot of self-help books don't touch on, is he talks about luck and chance and how that is a part of your life. And he talks about the first time he noticed that is he was the third boy born in his family. And the first boy had to take over his family's farm. The second boy was married off to another family, and since he was the third boy, he actually had this freedom to go and start his own business and become wealthy. And so I do appreciate that he goes and he actually factored and explains that there is this chance that we all have in our lives that actually set everyone on a certain path, and you just have to deal with the cards that you're dealt in that little bit of chance.
Man, I could talk an hour, or I could ask you an hour's worth of questions on that, and we could have maybe we should have another conversation on that, but that sounds like an awesome book. I'm definitely gonna. I'll probably do the audiobook as well. But that's great. So I can't stand up to that, but mine was actually a very intriguing book called The Power of Pull, and it was recommended to me from a friend. And I actually honestly haven't finished it yet, but I've been chugging through it the last month or so. And it's really about how our world has changed in terms of, online, connected all the time. And as you're creating things and actually it's really interesting because it kind of touches on what's going on with Founders Live and how you create a community, not a one-to-many platform, and you create a pull mechanism around meaningful content and experiences versus pushing, which has been basically the 20th century was all about push. Media centric, when you look at either newspapers or then it came into TV and then cable and radio, cable and all that was all push. And actually then the internet came, and the first phase of the internet was replicating what had happened in the last century, push. But what's really the value of this networked world is how the tables have turned into an atmosphere of pull. And pull, actually, if there's a pull mechanism, it's because you're connecting with an individual or a group of people for a purpose, and then now you can start aggregating a group of people and a network around something, and then the reason why it's a pull mechanism is because you're providing value in their life. And so again, I could take an hour and talk about that, but that was it's a very powerful book. I'm not even fully done with it yet, but it's greatly influenced what I'm doing here with Founders Live and how to create a meaningful, sustaining brand and experience that is pull. Pull means that someone wants your information. Push means you as a brand are just shoving it right in their face.
Yeah.
And I think that's the absolute difference now, that we're living in a world of pull. We're living in a world of consumers give you permission to actually get their attention. It's an attention economy. And I'm totally fascinated with that, and I'm focused on that, creating this brand, Founders Live, and other brands that I'm working on. So it's a great book.
Yeah, that really speaks on just how much opportunity there is now, right? There's so much opportunity with the way that you can syndicate your content and get yourself out there, that you're really able to, it's not up to all the big guys to get that out there, and not the only path anymore. So it's really interesting. So do you read that physical book, or do you have a Kindle?
Hey, I'm old school, man. I read the book. I read the physical book. I love turning pages. I like underlining. I've actually, honestly, I've never had a Kindle, and I'm not sure if I'm going to.
Yeah, I always had this dream of having my own library one day, and I wanted to have this big collection of books. And then a friend for Christmas, like 5 years ago, bought me a Kindle, and it was like, well, now I have to. But I've actually been really disappointed. There's like no price difference in buying a physical book versus buying the Kindle book, which has been kind of a disappointment. But when you move, that's kind of the only time you think of it. It's like, oh, I don't have to move all these books. But if I give one recommendation, something that goes so underutilized, and I have to give credit to my girlfriend who pushed me on this, but you got to go to the library. The library has all the books that you're talking about or could find on Amazon, and they're there for free. And you can get them on any digital platform. That audiobook I got, I had to wait 10 days to get it, but I had a queue of other books. And what they do is you pretty much just reserve it, and when it's free, they just digitally send it to you. And utilizing the library, it's so underutilized by so many people. And entrepreneurs, if you're looking for a great resource, like it's a great resource to go find those things so you don't have to pay $10 a week on new books.
Huge recommendation. Nice job.
Cool. Well, Nick, you got anyone to thank for the show?
I've got you to thank, my friend. Thanks for always setting this up, and let's keep rocking.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I realize this is, I think, our 12th episode. So I think we're getting a good little groove going, and now we kind of probably can start getting this out a little bit more seriously now that we have a routine.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Nick. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next week.
Peace.